sometimes a problem with data from one LEA will cause the entirety of the proactive import to break. I know we have had problems in prior years, although I think this has been resolved, where we've had some schools starting up the school year at a time when other folks haven't ended the prior one, and managing that transition in a common way has been a struggle. There are some concrete advantages to having this amount of separation in terms of making it so that a failure of one set of feeds within the charter sector doesn't take down the whole sector, having access to SLED and SEDS and all the other sorts of things like that in the enrollment and demographic side. I think on the attendance and discipline side...
Jeff, I'm sorry. Can you say that again? Because it's really important and you said it very fast.
Sorry. Let me try that one more time. Right now, because there's a single feed from proactive to the SLED and SED system, if there is a problem in the data in that feed, or if there is a difficulty in the transmission of that data, that a single issue that might be associated with one LEA can take down the entire feed for the entire charter sector. And
one
so
student within one LEA.
one student within one LEA with, you know, an exit mark over a letter has at times broken a feed, prevented schools from being able to enter an IEP for a student that had entered the prior day, and prevented compliance with IDEA. And that's bad. Like, it would be a better thing if we had a more fault-tolerant system where, you know, a problem that might impact one LEA only impacts that LEA and doesn't take down everything else. And so that's one of the reasons why we do want to move to having independent feeds from each LEA and have less risk of failure, but still have it be done in a way that ensures that the data is going where it's supposed to go. And so we do think that there are advantages to moving to this kind of structure. Yes, Colin.
So Colin Walsh, Community Academy.
I think he has to.
Yeah. So Colin Walsh, Community Academy. That makes sense. And the other side of that for me is technical support. So, you know, if you're going to have independent feeds from each LEA, there's a lot of, we collect data, we record data, we organize our data in a lot of different ways. The thing that gives me pause is getting it set up this year and say mission accomplished, and then a year and a half from now not having people in place to provide the support that we need to actually continue. Have you given any thoughts on that?
Yes, so I mean, this is something that keeps me up at night, not because we're not addressing it, but because it's a challenge. There is no currently allocated annual recurring fund for the SLED data system. My team is currently funded at a rate of, I think, 3.8 FTEs statewide. That's not reflective of what our current level of service is. We've managed to get lots of additional pockets of money and grant funding and other stuff like that to expand the scope to be able to provide support. There isn't full sustainability on that funding or that staffing yet, and I think that is part of something that we need to do over time to be able to keep everything running the way that it should run. And so I think there is some level of associated risk, and this is me, you know, not trying to push folks in the audience or anywhere else to allocate additional funding to us, just to be very clear. But we have enough funds available through the next 2 to 3 years from a combination of the SLED grant that's funding expansion and continued development of our system, as well as the emptying out of the remaining capital funds that were originally allocated for SLED to maintain a strong level of support. And we have a sustainably funded 5% help desk for technology products that is sustainably funded over time. And so we are in a strong position for the next 3 years. I think the sustainability after that is going to be dependent on access to additional funds to actually operate, you know, a continuing SLED system. But I think what I've heard is that there is a commitment to make that happen over the next 2 or 3 years, and that's enough time to get sustainability. So there's not an urgent crisis. There is dedicated folks. There's been continued, so since I arrived, the size of my team has doubled every 5.5 months. And with being here over 2 years now that's gotten to a relatively large group. And that trend doesn't appear to be slowing down yet, so I think there are going to be enough people to provide the support. I think we need to be smart about how to do it. I think the other thing that I want to say about that is I want to say that William Henderson, who is leading up the data system stuff, do you want to look at people? He is a core part of the strategy for sustainability on this. He used to run the One App system at OSSI along with the financial aid, and took the process of applying for financial aid from being a 30-day process for approval for tech funding to being 15-second approvals. He is working on doing the process engineering and the efficiency development and management for our systems to get us to the same level of sustainability, and I have a lot of faith in his success in terms of both customer service and in terms of building efficiencies over time also. But I want to acknowledge that that is the thing that I'm trying to keep my eye on, and I think it's the make or break for all of our systems being successful, is them having enough support behind them to be useful.
As we're acquiring or transitioning to new SIS or any other systems, is there anything we can do to make it more, make it easier for OSSI or anybody, or anything we can do in terms of collaborating with other LEAs or anybody to try to make this a better, more streamlined process?
So I think awareness of your data dictionary and assurance that you're collecting the information that's been collected historically is I think probably the biggest thing there. We produced a draft data collection handbook last year. It won't be, the scope of that is actually bigger, I think, than what we're going to end up collecting sustainably over time. But I think it might be a good guide for those, or at least pieces of information LEA probably internally would want to be able to track on the folks that it has. In terms of the actual systems infrastructure, having it be efficient, our sort of baseline is ODBC access in some form, and then if a system has ODBC access, that it's going to have a relatively straightforward job of connectivity. And that's based on the analysis that Rhode Island and some other states have done as the easiest sort of integration. That if there's any way into the back end that can be accessed through an ODBC connector, that it can be done.
Having no idea what that means.
Yep.
Is there somebody at OSSI that can help out with, like, give us advice on those kinds of things, or ECHB or something?
Absolutely. Do you want to make contact with William Henderson, and we'll help you out with that. There's also one of the things that Rhode Island did that we thought was smart is they produced draft language for people to put into RFPs for SISs that would spell out the specific requirements for making things work, so that if you wanted to use that, that's something you could do. That is something that we will also be doing, and I think the reason why we haven't done it yet is there's still uncertainty about what the final scope of data that will be continually collected over time looks like.
So a big reason for doing this was to alleviate the burden on schools around data collection and the FTEs. What do you imagine is going to be the time or the FTE allocations by school to keep their ADT up and running and working on a regular basis? So are we talking, minimum time? Are we talking that, as they're budgeting for future years, what are we looking at? I think we know how much time it takes for proactive at this point for attendance and discipline, but what are we talking about with enrollment and that?
So Rhode Island has slightly more LEAs than us, and at the state level they have a half an FTE dedicated to all ADT related support. They said that they, on average, have one fault happen on a monthly basis, so they will have one LEA have a problem a month on average, and it's usually a relatively quick and simple fix like a reboot. Yeah, so that's dramatically different than what our world is right now.
And does Rhode Island use this Excel flat file? Are they all the same SIS? Is it multiple different systems like we'll have here? What's this? I don't know there.
Yeah. So they have multiple SISs, they have a substantial presence of most of the major commercial ones. The only SIS actually that we were aware of that's in use in DC that's not in use in Rhode Island is School Force. And so there's a diversity of SISs, there's a diversity of educational models. They do have people doing flat file uploads, and they literally do the entirety of their data collections through the ADT. They do no manual data collections other than that. They have a separate, the ADT is hooked up to a system that also allows folks to override it on occasion, but that system, including the override and the ADT part that's connected to it, is the entirety of how their data collection is operated.
So the big sell for us, I'm at Washington Latin and we're a smaller LEA, and I think for some of the smaller LEAs, the big sell was kind of eliminating the proactive piece, and if that's not going to happen until next year or possibly ever, why are we rushing the pilot at this point? I mean, when you have so few people doing all of these things like DCCAS and any kind of data collection, like why now? That's frustrating.
So I think some of it is that, we want to be in a situation to use this for enrollment and demographics for next year's enrollment audit, and that our experience from the past, particularly the 2011 enrollment audit, which started off, I don't know how many people remember the beginnings of that, but started off relatively disastrous because of system-related issues, that we not have a replication of that experience. We have a situation now where we have had substantial problems with the ELL population for the enrollment audit, which is high stakes because it determines funding, where the approach that we're using now has issues with accurately identifying ELL students, and there's a lot of verification involved, and we still have had situations where LEAs have had undercounts of ELLs where we've had to do after the fact sort of crisis fixes on that. And I think the urgency created by that is what has pushed us to try to get something set up, installed, and tested now, so we can have confidence that we can have a very clean and smooth enrollment audit process by the time we hit next year, and hopefully have particularly better and more accurate ELL numbers than we're getting right now. I think the other piece is that the ability to do remaining streamlining, attendance, and discipline is dependent on us doing a successful and high quality implementation of the first piece. And so I think we want to get this out in its hands since I believe, and I think the state superintendent and the chief of staff stand behind me at OSSI as well on this, that this will be a substantial efficiency improvement over time, but it has to start somewhere. And so we're going to start with enrollment and demographic, which are the easiest, and then it is our hope and our aspiration to add additional collections, not just potentially attendance and discipline, but also to take the other collections that we're currently doing either through QuickBase or Excel, the staff data collection, the new to the US data collection, the rosters for the access process, and also push those through the ADT to create additional efficiencies in those processes as well. But we can't even consider whether or not that will happen, much less get to the place where we have those kinds of efficiency boosts until we have something that's in place and functioning. And obviously getting the enrollment and demographics is the most basic thing up and functioning first is the precursor. So I mean, I think that's the underlying piece, and I think we couldn't find another time that was a better time that left enough testing prior to the enrollment audit, which is the determinant of $1.3 billion of funding, I guess 1.4 next year, is the highest stakes thing of the year. You know, we felt I need to get it right before.